it was just really impactful for me to see at least one essence of you distilled down into this way that was helpful for me and helpful for other people. Could you give everyone kind of what that premise is?
Yeah. So with the book, and the book really started because I was in my office one day and I'm just like having some coffee and I'm typing away and just, doing emails or whatever you do regularly on a boring office afternoon. And all of a sudden, one of my best friends from work comes in and he is ranting and he's this very large man, ranting and raving and waving his arms all over the place. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? And he's like, that guy's winning and we're losing. And he's like stomping around my office. He's winning and we're losing. And I'm like looking up from my computer like, what are you talking about? And so he goes, our CEO's executive compensation had been announced that day. And it was obviously a number that was much larger than the number that he and I were receiving in terms of compensation. So CEO is obviously making a lot more money than my colleague was and a lot more money than I was. And he's like, he's winning and we're losing. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about because I'm winning. And he paused and he froze and he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean you're winning? And I said, I'm not playing the game of who makes the most money. I'm playing the game of who gets to spend the most amount of time in the coolest places around the world, and I'm winning. And he looked at me and he goes, that's brilliant, you should write a book. and so that was kind of the genesis of it. But I started thinking about it, and the depth of it is we are all so culturally conditioned in how we define and measure success and what a successful life looks like. And you're supposed to go to college, and you're supposed to get a job, and you're supposed to get married, and you're supposed to have a house, and you're supposed to have kids, and you have fancy cars, and you do this, and you do that, and you vacation in the right places, and all this kind of stuff. And that's what you're supposed to do. And if you're not careful, your whole life sort of gets sent down that path. And then you wake up and have a midlife or a quarter life crisis and you go, what am I doing? And why am I doing all of this, right? Who am I doing this for? And is this really what I want to be doing? And so the premise of the book is get aware of your cultural conditioning and all these ways that you've been taught to measure success. And then start thinking about which ones you actually want to accept and which ones you want to get rid of and just let go of and do things the way you want to do them. Play your game instead of playing someone else's game. And playing a game that you can win instead of playing a game that you're probably going to lose at, like who makes the most money in the world, right? So why don't you frame your own game and make it about your own choices? But doing that requires you to be aware of your conditioning, aware of all those voices in your head that may or may not be your own, and start sort of getting the courage to start on that path to define the way you want to live your life instead of doing what everyone else says you're supposed to be doing.
So those conditioning pieces, I think one thing when people hear cultural conditioning, they tend to think one thing, but when you actually get into that, I'll say the science, although I think both of us are armchair psychiatrists.
We're armchair neuroscientists
yeah,
and
that's right.
psychologists, yes.
And we both think we're very, very intelligent when we talk to each other. Until we talk to a real scientist, at least me, until I talk to a real one.
Yeah,
but
and you're like, I know nothing.
But I think for people that don't understand, I'll say some of the science behind it, but actually what your brain is doing, the just nuts and bolts of, no, cultural conditioning is nothing more, nothing less than boom. Can you kind of give everyone an idea of what that thing is that our brains are doing?
Yeah. So, and again, not a neuroscientist. Have read a lot of articles, but not a neuroscientist. But basically, what happens is, and if you think about this, you think about when you're a little kid and you're taught that some things are good and some things are bad. And some of it's because you don't want to get burned by touching the stove, or there are other things that adults are telling you to do or not to do to try to keep you safe and keep you growing and healthy. And you learn what's good and what's bad. And then you get into school and you start learning what's good and what's bad. And people start teaching you how you're supposed to behave, and you're not supposed to kick kids on the playground. And people start putting gender into it around 5 or 6 years old, of what girls do and what boys do. And then you get into middle school and it's about what kind of grades are you getting and who are your friends and are you part of the cool kids or not. And you get into high school and it's about your relationships with different people. And then you get into college and it's about what you're going to study and what your GPA is. And then you go and you get a job, and it's, and so it's all of this kind of training that is part of your cultural conditioning that goes on, and it's reinforced. There's sort of positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements, if you want. But so what happens is your brain really likes when people are saying, hey, good job, way to go, and squirts out all fun chemicals to make you feel good and happy, right? And when you do something wrong, your brain squirts out all of the scary chemicals, your adrenaline and stuff of, oh gosh, I might be unsafe and I might be in danger. And so what happens over time is you know what kinds of behaviors are going to lead other people to encourage you and say, good job, way to go. And then over time, you know which ones are going to get you in trouble and make you feel those bad feelings, right? So what's really going on when you're trying to do something against what you've been trained, and when you're trying to do something different than what other people expect, is your brain starts having a little freak out. And by the way, when you don't do something that other people expect, their brains have little freakouts too, because you're not doing what they expect. And then all of a sudden you're freaking out, and then you retreat and go, never mind, I'll just do the regular thing because it's safer, right? And so that's your brain trying to keep you safe and all of that. And so that's really what was fascinating to me when I started learning about all of this and studying and reading, and a lot of our conversations led to it too, of like, this is sort of a brain process trying to keep me in line based on all of these influences and factors that are telling me to define success a certain way and live a certain kind of life and pursue certain indicators of success, the kind of house you live in, the car you drive, whatever. And how do I peel back from that? And how do I deal with those little, I call them my little monsters. How do I deal with those little monsters when they start coming up and get away from that fear part and those little monsters and get into my brain part and my rational thinking part to be able to move forward on a path that's comfortable for me. And the little monsters part is actually one of the most fun parts. And in the book, I drew all the pictures in the book. They're like worksheets and pictures. I'm actually very proud of those because I'm not an artist. But there are pictures of my little monsters and what they look like in my head now in the book. And the little monsters, I had to kind of convert them from being these like scary, gruesome demons to looking like those little cartoon monsters in Monsters, Inc., you know? And so now when they pop up, I'm like, oh, hello, cute little monster. Like, I've got this. You can go back, it's safe, and I can start acting like a rational, mature adult again, right?